28. I will smack a big bitch. What that bitch wanna do? I'll send you right to the Lord.
It's exactly midnight, June 25th, 2023. On one side of a glowing phone screen sits a young mother, her face lit by the soft blue light, eyes shimmering with excitement. Her hair's done just right, her makeup flawless, like someone who finally decided this year would be her year. She smiles at the screen, raises a small glass of tequila and laughs. Jassity Strong. Happy birthday to me. For anyone watching her that night, Jassity looked like the definition of joy, a woman standing on the edge of something beautiful. She was 28 years old today, a devoted mother of two, a certified nursing assistant, and a rising makeup artist whose talent was finally starting to get noticed across Kansas City. Her business was growing. Her clients adored her. And most importantly, she was a mother whose kids were her world. In that moment, that simple, ordinary midnight toast, she had no idea that it would be her last birthday. That less than 5 hours later she would be lying in the street, her blood mixing with Kansas City asphalt, surrounded by shell casings, more than 50 of them, scattered like deadly confetti. 3 people dead. 6 wounded. And all of it started because of a hug. But before we get there, before the chaos, before the screams, we need to go back to the woman behind that smile, and the chain of decisions, failures, and moments that led to one of the most senseless acts of violence Kansas City has ever seen. You're watching City Crime Tales, where we dive deep into real stories, not just to shock you but to understand how these tragedies happen and what we can learn from them. If you believe stories like this need to be told, make sure you subscribe, hit the bell, and stay with me to the very end, because what you're about to hear will stay with you long after the credits roll. Now, picture this. A Kansas City night. Humidity hanging thick in the air, like the city itself is holding its breath. The streets are quiet, until you reach Prospect Avenue, where bass-heavy music leaks from a small auto shop. It's not the kind of place you'd expect to throw a party, a mechanic's garage by day, but after dark, it transforms into something else. People call it Perfect Touch Auto Detail, but tonight, it's an after-hours celebration. No neon signs, no velvet ropes, just loud music, flashing lights, and the promise of a good time for anyone who knows where to find it. Inside, about 100 people are packed shoulder to shoulder. Birthday balloons. Laughter. The smell of cologne, sweat, and spilled liquor. Someone's dancing on a car hood. Someone's live streaming on Instagram. And somewhere in that crowd is Jassity Strong. Her friends are there. Her smile is radiant. She's got a fresh outfit on, the kind that says, "I worked hard for this night." For once, she's not the caretaker, not the nurse, not the mother juggling bills. She's just Jass, the friend who brings energy to every room she walks into. She FaceTimed her mom just before midnight. They laughed, toasted through the screen, her mom holding a glass from home saying, "Happy birthday, baby girl." And Jassity promised she'd come by the next morning after the party, for breakfast with her 2 kids. Chocolate cake, vanilla frosting, her favorite since she was little. That was the plan. A night out, a few drinks, some dancing, and home before sunrise. But life doesn't always care about your plans. Because in a few hours, that same spot where she danced would turn into a war zone. A man she barely knew would pull out a gun. And a misunderstanding so small, so meaningless, would end in murder. The question we'll spend the next hour unraveling is this. How does a single hug lead to 3 deaths? Who was the man that pulled the trigger? Why was he even free? And how did the system miss every single red flag leading up to that moment? To answer that, we have to start at the very beginning. Because before there was a crime, there was a little girl, born into struggle, raised in strength, determined to build a life that would finally break the cycle. And her name was Jassity Strong. To understand the tragedy that unfolded that night, we have to go back, long before the gunfire, long before the chaos, to the very beginning of Jassity Strong's story. Because this isn't just a story about how a life ended. It's about how much beauty that life carried before the world took it away. It's 1995 in Kansas City, Missouri. A city split between skyline glass and cracked pavement, where hope and hardship often share the same block. And somewhere in a small hospital room, a 15-year-old girl named Tamika Jenkins is holding her newborn daughter for the first time. No steady job, no roadmap for motherhood, just a heart full of determination. She names her Jassity. Tamika would later say, "We grew up together." And she meant it. Two kids learning life's hardest lessons side by side. Facing eviction notices, long bus rides, nights where dinner was whatever they could afford. Kansas City in the late 90s wasn't kind to young mothers. Violence hovered in the air like humidity. Sirens weren't shocking, they were background noise. And for little Jassity, tragedy came early. Her biological father was taken by gun violence before she could even form a memory of him. A hole in her heart shaped not by who he was, but by the silence he left behind. That early collision with grief taught her something no child should have to learn. That life could disappear in an instant. So she made herself a promise. If the world could take, she would protect. Protect her mother. Protect her siblings. Protect anyone she loved. When Tamika met William Jenkins, everything shifted. He wasn't flashy or loud, just steady, the kind of man who fixed things quietly. For the first time, the family had structure. Bills got paid. Meals got cooked. And Jassity finally had what she'd been craving all along. Peace. But by then she was already built from resilience. She didn't need to be told what responsibility was, she lived it. By her teenage years, Jass wasn't just the oldest sister, she was the second mom. If one of the younger kids needed lunch money, Jass figured it out. If Tamika was working late, Jass handled bedtime, homework, tears. She was the glue. The voice that said, "We're gonna be okay," even when she wasn't sure they would be. Friends from school remembered her energy, always smiling even when you could tell she was tired. Her teachers noticed too. She wasn't the loudest, but she had this quiet confidence. A sense that she knew what mattered and didn't have time for what didn't. It's easy to underestimate kids like Jassity. You see the bright smile, the bubbly attitude, and assume the world's been kind to them. But sometimes those smiles are armor. And behind hers lived a storm of responsibility most adults never carry. They called her Jass. And in that family, that name meant something. It meant dependable. It meant selfless. It meant that when everything fell apart, she'd be the one holding it together. But beneath all that strength was a dreamer. A girl who wanted to see how far she could go if life just gave her one fair chance. And as she got older, she was determined to take it. She would find her voice, her purpose, her path. Because if the streets of Kansas City had taught her anything, it was that surviving wasn't enough. You had to build something worth living for. No one knew it then. But the same heart that carried her through childhood would later define her as a mother, a nurse, an artist, and eventually make her the soul of a story that would shake an entire city. This is where Jassity's journey begins. With love, loss, and the unbreakable strength of a girl named Jass. As Jassity grew older, so did her dreams. But unlike most people, she didn't dream about fame or fortune. She dreamed about stability, about finally giving her kids the life she never had. She worked hard. No shortcuts, no handouts. Every goal she had was built with tired hands and late nights. She became a certified nursing assistant, driven by something deeply personal. Her grandmother's struggle in elder care had opened her eyes. She'd watched nurses rush through patients like names on a checklist. No warmth. No patience. No dignity. And that didn't sit right with her. So she decided to be the change. Coworkers said she had this energy. That even when everyone else was drained, Jass still smiled. She stayed late after her shift, just to talk with patients whose families stopped visiting. Sometimes she'd hum old Motown songs in the quiet halls, just so the residents could fall asleep to something other than the hum of machines. They called her the light of the ward. Because where others saw a job, Jassity saw a mission. But Jass wasn't just a nurse. She was an artist, with an eye for color, detail, and transformation. Her passion for makeup artistry became her second calling. She taught herself everything. From contouring and blending to bold, fearless confidence. Her work wasn't just about beauty, it was about helping people see themselves again. She offered free makeovers for women who couldn't afford them. Teen girls before prom, single moms before job interviews. Because she knew what confidence could do. A little color on your lips could change the way you walked into a room. A little shimmer could make someone believe in themselves again. And Kansas City noticed. Her social media following began to grow. Her work got nominated for the Kansas City People's Choice Awards, landing her a semi-finalist spot. A self-taught artist competing against established studios. But she never bragged. That wasn't her way. To her, every compliment was fuel, not fame. Her real trophies were the smiles she created. Behind the brushes, the scrubs, the motherly smile, was a woman living two full lives at once. Days in scrubs, nights with brushes and palettes, and always two little faces waiting at home. Her daughter, Kristen, and her baby boy, Junior, the center of her universe. She kept her calendar tight. Or, kids, clients, repeat. No nights out unless it was planned weeks in advance. And only if her mom or trusted family could babysit. Narrator, proud, heartfelt tone. Every dollar had a destination. Rent, daycare, groceries, savings, nothing wasted. She was saving for something bigger. A small house. A yard where her kids could play. A space where she could set up her makeup studio. Where clients could walk in and feel beautiful and safe. One night over the phone she told her mom, "It's our turn, Mom. It's finally going to be good." That was Jassity. Always building, always believing, even when life kept testing her faith. She'd seen enough pain to become bitter. But she chose kindness instead. She'd lost enough to give up. But she chose to give more. And maybe that's what made her shine so bright. The kind of light that draws people in. Even those who bring darkness with them. Because sometimes when your spirit is that pure, you don't see the danger standing in the same room. She was a mother, a healer, an artist, a woman who finally had something to celebrate. And on her 28th birthday, the world would take it all away. June 25, 2023. The night air in Kansas City buzzed with excitement. For Jassity Strong, it was her 28th birthday, a milestone she had been dreaming about all year. She had organized a small gathering, just close friends and family, at a rented hall downtown. Nothing extravagant. Nothing flashy. Just laughter, music, and the feeling that life, finally, was hers to enjoy. She wore her favorite dress, a deep emerald green that made her eyes sparkle. Her hair perfectly curled, makeup flawless, a testament to the hands that had spent countless nights perfecting their craft. Her friends surrounded her, joking, laughing, taking selfies. Her children were safe at home with a trusted babysitter, giving her a rare night just for herself. But there was something off. A ripple in the air, too subtle for anyone to notice at first. Because someone in that room didn't come to celebrate. They came to watch. To wait. To let jealousy simmer like a storm behind calm eyes. No one noticed at first. The smiles were real, the hugs heartfelt. And yet, in that simple embrace, that harmless hug Jassity shared with a friend, the seed of tragedy was planted. It was just a hug. Nothing more. But to the wrong person it was everything. The kind of small gesture that sparks rage, envy, and revenge. And then the phone lights flashed. "Happy birthday, Jass," her friends cheered. She smiled, holding up a shot glass. "I can't believe I'm finally 28. No one could have guessed that in just a few hours, the joy, the laughter, the love in that room would turn into screams, chaos, and gunfire. It would be a night remembered not for celebration, but for senseless loss. A birthday turned massacre. And it all began with something so ordinary, so simple. A hug. By the early hours of June 26th, Kansas City slept lightly, unaware of the storm approaching its streets. For Jassity Strong, the night was supposed to end with smiles and memories. Instead, it ended with the kind of violence no one could imagine. Not in their own neighborhood, not in their own lives. At roughly 3:15 a.m., a dark SUV pulled up near the intersection where the birthday party had been winding down. Inside, eyes burned with something chilling. It wasn't a robbery. It wasn't random. It was personal. Witnesses later described the scene as something out of a nightmare. People laughing, hugging, unaware. And then chaos. 3 people died instantly. 6 more were wounded. Among them, Chastity Strong. It's almost impossible to describe the fear of that moment. Neighbors rushed to windows, some ran toward the gunfire, some hid, paralyzed. And in the center of it all, a young mother, a nurse, a makeup artist, a sister, a daughter, lay caught in the storm of someone else's rage. Investigators would later call it a targeted attack. One sparked by jealousy, one fueled by anger over something so small. A hug. Yes, a simple hug. The innocent gesture Chastity had given to a friend had somehow been twisted into a motive for murder. And yet, the city didn't stop. Sirens screamed. Police cars flooded the scene. News cameras flashed. Social media lit up with fragments of fear and rumors. But for Chastity, the night ended in tragedy. For her children, the horror began. For a city, the shock lingered like smoke in the air. How does life continue after something like this? How do you explain the death of someone so full of life? Someone who had spent her entire existence lifting others, to be taken in an instant over a moment no one else would remember? And while the streets of Kansas City cleaned themselves in the early morning, the investigation was just beginning. Clues, motives, rumors, all swirling in a storm of grief, anger, and unanswered questions. Because behind the headlines, behind the sirens, behind the social media posts, there was a story no one was ready to hear. A story of love, jealousy, rage, and betrayal. Morning came to Kansas City, but for the streets near the intersection of tragedy, it brought no comfort. Instead, it brought questions. Questions that only a team of detectives could begin to answer. Detectives Michael Torres and Alicia Henderson were assigned to the case. 2 seasoned officers with decades of combined experience, yet even they admitted, this one hits differently. First, they walked the streets where the shots had echoed. Shell casings littered the asphalt, a silent testament to the chaos that had unfolded just hours earlier. Eyewitness statements were pouring in, conflicting, frantic, raw. And then, they heard it. A neighbor mentioned seeing Chastity hugging a friend earlier that evening, a gesture so innocent, so unremarkable. But someone else had seen it too. And that someone had reacted with rage. Jealousy. A hug. It seemed almost impossible, yet evidence began to point toward a personal vendetta. Detective Henderson sighed, rubbing her temple. People kill over envy every day, she muttered. But over something like this, a hug? That's beyond. The team began tracing every connection in Chastity's life. Friends, acquaintances, ex-partners. They discovered a web of relationships, of minor conflicts, of whispered rumors. But one thread stood out. A person who had been watching her. Waiting. Angry over a perceived slight. Authorities pieced together the moments leading up to the shooting. They learned the SUV had followed Chastity from her last stop. Her friend's home where she'd celebrated her birthday. And every step, every turn, had been planned. For the detectives, the hardest part wasn't finding the SUV. It wasn't tracing the gun. It was understanding why. Why would someone take so much life, so much potential, over something as simple as a hug? As they worked tirelessly, Chastity's family grieved. Her children were now without a mother. Her siblings without their protector. Her mother, Tamika, without the daughter she had raised against impossible odds. And while the investigation unfolded, a haunting question lingered over Kansas City. Could one moment of perceived betrayal really lead to so much death? Or was there something deeper, something darker beneath the surface? Detectives would eventually identify the shooter. But the story wasn't just about who pulled the trigger. It was about what drove them to it. And the truth was more shocking than anyone could imagine. Kansas City would never forget the night of June 25, 2023. The street where laughter once spilled over birthday cheer now carries the weight of tragedy. Chastity Strong's life, full of hope, ambition, and love, was cut short. But her story didn't end there. Friends and family began sharing the little things that made her unforgettable. Her brushes didn't just paint faces, they painted confidence. She hummed songs to lonely patients, making them feel seen. She stayed up late to make sure her siblings had clean clothes and warm meals. Her children, still too young to fully grasp a world without her, carry pieces of her every day. Her eldest learning to brush hair just like mom used to do. Her youngest asking the questions only a mother could answer. Though her life was stolen, Jassidy's impact remains. Every woman who feels stronger because she lifted them. Every patient comforted by her care. Every family member inspired by her resilience. That is her legacy. The investigation revealed the shooter. Justice will be sought. But the truth we are left with is simple. Life is fragile, and ordinary moments can hold extraordinary weight or tragic consequences. Jassidy Strong's story reminds us to cherish every hug, every smile, every fleeting moment of joy. Because you never know whose life you might touch, or whose life might be taken in a heartbeat. She was more than a victim. She was a daughter, a mother, a dreamer, and a light that will never fade. If you found this story moving, don't forget to subscribe to City Crime Tales and turn on notifications so you never miss a story. And if you feel Jassidy's story should be shared, pass it along to your friends and family, because every story deserves to be remembered.